And then I dreamed a monologue about a nervous guy. And I got up and wrote the rest of the monologue and did it on The Tonight Show.
To the world, he was the hilariously nervous Barney Fife, a man who could make millions laugh with a single twitch. He was the bumbling but lovable landlord Ralph Furley and the star of films like The Ghost and Mr. Chicken. Don Knotts was a national treasure, a comedic genius whose work seemed to spring from a place of pure joy. For decades, he was a comforting presence on our television screens, a piece of Americana representing a simpler time. But after his death in 2006, the story that emerged, pieced together from intimate recollections and detailed biographies, forever altered the public's perception of this beloved icon. What was revealed wasn't a life of unadulterated joy, but one of secret torment. The truth, as told by those closest to him, didn't just uncover a few hidden struggles. It exposed a man deeply scarred by a traumatic past. It painted a portrait of an artist crippled by severe anxiety, haunted by a complicated friendship with his best friend, Andy Griffith, and plagued by a deep-seated fear that his incredible success was all just a fragile illusion. The man who made everyone smile was, in reality, hiding a pain so profound it nearly broke him. This is the story of the man we thought we knew, and the difficult truth he carried every single day. Don Knotts was born into a world that seemed determined to break him. Long before Hollywood found him, he was a small, frail boy living in a house filled with fear in Morgantown, West Virginia. He was the youngest of 4 sons, born in 1924 to a mother already in her 40s. His family had lost their farm, and the atmosphere at home was thick with resentment and sadness. While his brothers had a room, Don slept on a cot in the kitchen, a constant, quiet observer of the chaos. But the lack of physical comfort was nothing compared to the emotional terror that defined his childhood. His father, Jesse Knotts, was a broken man battling what was likely undiagnosed schizophrenia and a severe alcohol addiction. Most days, he was a simmering volcano of unpredictable rage. For young Don, simply walking through the house was a terrifying ordeal. He later admitted that his father's abuse was not just emotional, it was violent and deeply scarring. Decades later, Don confirmed that his father had terrorized him, once even threatening him with a knife. This was the horrifying reality behind the laughter, the dark secret that fueled the nervous, trembling characters he would one day become famous for portraying. Before the world knew of his private pain, it knew his public persona intimately. Don Knotts was, for millions, Deputy Barney Fife of Mayberry, a character so iconic he seemed more real than the actor who played him. It was a role he practically willed into existence. After seeing the pilot for a new show about a small town, Sheriff Knotts called his old friend from Broadway, Andy Griffith, and joked that his sheriff might need a deputy. Griffith loved the idea, and in that moment, one of television's most legendary partnerships was born. Barney Fife was a masterpiece of physical comedy. He was a bundle of misplaced confidence and shivering insecurity. His eyes would bulge with alarm. His voice would crack with authority, and his lanky frame seemed to be in a constant state of flustered motion. He was the man entrusted with a gun, but only allowed to carry a single bullet, which he had to keep in his shirt pocket. It perfectly encapsulated the character, a man who desperately craved respect, but was fundamentally too fragile to be trusted with it. Audiences didn't just like him, they adored him. The chemistry between Knotts' high-strung deputy and Griffith's calm, steady sheriff, Andy Taylor, was the heart of the show. Andy was the grounded center of Mayberry, which allowed Barney to spin out into hilarious orbits of chaos. Knotts was so brilliant that he elevated the sitcom into a timeless study of friendship. He won an incredible 5 Emmy Awards for the role, 3 during the show's original run and 2 for guest appearances after he left, a testament to just how deeply he had captured the nation's heart. After leaving Mayberry, Knotts continued to build on this persona in films like The Ghost and Mr. Chicken and The Shakiest Gun in the West. Later, a new generation knew him as the flamboyant landlord, Ralph Furley, on Three's Company. Though different, Mr. Furley shared Barney's DNA, a man of bluster who was, underneath it all, deeply insecure. This was the Don Knotts the world loved. What no one could have imagined was that for Don, this wasn't just an act. The trembling and the fear weren't just character traits. They were the very real demons he wrestled with every day, born in that terrifying house in West Virginia. The terror of Don Knotts' childhood didn't end with his father. The entire household was a crucible of dysfunction. His older brothers were often drunk and would get into violent fights, adding to the constant chaos. They also mistreated their much younger, frailer brother, compounding his sense of isolation. He later recalled, "I did not come into the world with a great deal of promise. He was a stoop-shouldered, painfully thin child who suffered from a perpetually nervous stomach, often sick from the sheer stress of his environment. His only emotional lifeline was one of his older brothers, Shadow, who offered a rare glimmer of kindness. But tragedy struck here as well. When Don was just a teenager, Shadow died suddenly from an asthma attack, a devastating blow that ripped away his only source of familial comfort. The loss left a void that, according to his daughter Karen, clung to him for the rest of his life. He found his only escape in performance. He created a ventriloquist dummy named Danny, and with Danny in hand, he could finally find his voice. Performing for anyone who would watch, he discovered that making others laugh was a powerful survival mechanism. It was a way to bring joy into a world that had offered him so little of it. The turning point came when he was 13. His father, Jesse, finally passed away. For Don, as tragic as a parent's death is, it was also a liberation. His daughter Karen would later describe it as a huge burden lifting from his shoulders. He was finally old enough to stand up to his other abusive brother, and for the first time, home was no longer a place of terror. He began to blossom, and his high school years became some of the best of his life. But the scars of those first 13 years ran deep. They had shaped him in ways that would be impossible to erase. Even at the peak of his fame, he was still, in some ways, that small, terrified boy, afraid that at any moment, the world would see him for the fraud he believed himself to be. When Don Knotts landed the role of Barney Fife, it should have been a final escape from his painful past. On the surface, it was. He was a beloved television star and a critical darling, but behind the scenes, success only sharpened his lifelong anxieties. The story that has since emerged from his family and biographers is of a man privately unraveling just as his public star was rising. He was plagued by crippling self-doubt and feelings of inferiority. According to his brother-in-law and biographer, Daniel de Visay, Don would become so distraught before a performance that he might spend days in bed, paralyzed by fear. In the 1950s, to cope with this overwhelming anxiety, he was prescribed medications, a common but often hidden practice for performers of that era. The man who played the comically incompetent deputy was, in reality, medicating himself just to get through the day. Wrapped up with his anxiety was a severe case of hypochondria. He lived in constant fear about his health, often convinced he was deathly ill from the most minor symptoms. His second wife, Laura Lee, recalled how he would joke about dying, but she could see the genuine terror in his eyes. This wasn't just a quirk. It was a manifestation of his childhood trauma, a feeling that disaster was always lurking just around the corner. The fame from The Andy Griffith Show only intensified these feelings. De Visay wrote about the profound difficulty Knotts had in reconciling his public persona with his private self. He felt like an imposter. At one point, he found himself in a therapist's office trying to purge himself of the depression and self-doubt that had been ingrained in him by his traumatic upbringing. Therapy did offer him some relief, but the struggle was constant. The physical comedy that made him famous took a tremendous toll, leaving him fatigued and irritable. The demands of producing 32 shows a year began to wear him down, and he eventually had to ask to be written out of 4 scripts per season just to catch his breath. His daughter, Karen Knotts, confirmed the shadows of his childhood never truly left him, recalling how his moods would swing dramatically and how she often felt she had to be the one to keep him emotionally grounded. To fans, the friendship between Andy Taylor and Barney Fife was the bedrock of Mayberry. Their on-screen chemistry was so genuine, it felt impossible for it not to be real, and for a long time, it was. Andy Griffith and Don Knotts were true friends who had bonded on Broadway years earlier. Andy was, as one person put it, the world's greatest audience for Don, often bursting into tears of laughter at his friend's antics on set. But behind this idyllic image, a complex and painful distance developed, one that Don Knotts would carry with him for years. The trouble started after the 5th season. The simple story is that Knotts left to pursue a movie career. The truth is far more complicated. At the time, Andy Griffith owned 50% of the show, which made him incredibly wealthy. Don, on the other hand, was just a salaried actor. His manager later admitted he'd worked out a terrible deal for Don. As the 5th season concluded, Knotts, believing the show was ending, based on conversations with Griffith, signed a 5-picture deal with Universal. According to de Vissé's biography, Knotts had also asked for a partnership stake in the show, but a deal was never reached. When Andy decided to continue the show, it was too late. Knotts was locked into his movie contract. He later said in an interview, "If I had known that Andy intended to go on with the show, of course I would have stayed." This created an unspoken distance. While they remained friends, things had changed. Some on set claimed that Griffith, who was known for a fiery temper, harbored a professional jealousy of Knotts, whose character often stole the show and won all the awards. Years later, another layer of insecurity emerged. During Don's 3rd marriage, his wife found Andy Griffith hilarious. When they would dine together, her laughter at Andy's jokes reportedly made Don intensely jealous. On one occasion, he allegedly snapped, "I'm the funny one." It was a small human moment, but it spoke to a deeper need to be seen as the comedic genius in the friendship. The perfect partnership of Mayberry, it turned out, had a far more complicated and human story behind it. The final years of Don Knotts' life were marked by a cruel series of physical battles. The first major blow came in 1981 when he was diagnosed with macular degeneration, a progressive eye disease that attacks central vision. For a man whose wide-eyed expressions were his comedic trademark, the diagnosis was a devastating threat. He admitted to falling into a deep depression, wrestling with the fear that his career was over. But in a moment of profound resilience, he found a new perspective. He told the New York Times, "And then, one day I said to myself, I bet a blind person would give his right arm to have the vision I have." Determined not to let the disease beat him, he learned to memorize scripts by ear and continued to work, hiding his struggles from the public. While his vision was severely impaired, he was never fully blind and kept performing. But his body wasn't finished fighting him. In the early 2000s, he received another crushing diagnosis: lung cancer. He'd quit smoking years before, but the damage was done. Initially, he kept this secret as well, afraid the work offers would stop. Even as he became tethered to oxygen tanks, he refused to step away from the stage, concealing his tanks just off camera during performances. During this time, he and Andy Griffith had fallen somewhat out of touch, but when Andy heard his old friend was ill, he rushed to be by his side. In those final days, the complexities of their past seemed to melt away, replaced by the simple comfort of a lifelong friendship. Knotts was reportedly insecure about his friend seeing him with an oxygen mask, so Griffith, in a moment of pure empathy, joked, "We're going to get through this." On February 24, 2006, Don Knotts passed away at 81. One of the last people to visit his bedside was Andy Griffith. Griffith later recalled, "I told him I loved him and I held his hand." Even in his final moments, Don's comedic spirit refused to be extinguished. His daughter Karen shared that he did or said something so unexpectedly hilarious from his deathbed that she and his wife burst into uncontrollable laughter. Embarrassed, Karen ran out of the room, a decision she later regretted. A friend later comforted her, saying that comedians live for that sound and that she should have stayed to let him hear it one last time. The perfect, poignant end for a man who used laughter to fight a lifetime of pain. The story of Don Knotts is a powerful reminder that the faces we see on screen often hide a much more complex human being. If you found this glimpse into the secret life of a comedy legend compelling, please like this video and subscribe for more stories that explore the hidden lives of the stars we thought we knew. And we have to ask, does knowing the pain behind the performance change how you view his iconic characters? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Our understanding of Don Knotts has been irrevocably reshaped by the stories shared by his family, friends, and biographers. We can no longer see Barney Fife's nervous energy as just a comedic choice. We now know it was an echo of a very real and deep pain, the manifestation of a childhood steeped in terror and a lifetime spent battling anxiety. The laughter he generated wasn't just a performance. It was a survival mechanism, a shield he used to protect a fragile inner self. The portrait that emerges is of a multi-layered and profoundly sensitive man. It reveals an artist who, despite achieving incredible fame and winning 5 Emmys, never fully felt worthy of his success. He was haunted by the fear of losing it all, a fear rooted in the instability of his early life. His daughter Karen called him the person who could find light in the darkness and turn pain into punchlines. This is perhaps his truest legacy. Don Knotts was more than just a funny man. He was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. He took the terror of his childhood and transformed it into the harmless fumbling of a deputy with 1 bullet. He channeled his debilitating anxiety into characters that made millions feel less alone in their own fears. He showed us that humor can be a bridge over our hardest days. The man who made America laugh was carrying a burden we never could have imagined. But in knowing his struggle, our appreciation for his genius only deepens. His comedy is no longer just funny. It is courageous.